Alright, hey guys, it's me Shamal here. So basically for this video I just wanted to talk about my improvement plan for getting faster at the 3x3. And some of this advice can also be applied to larger size cubes as well. So essentially my improvement plan is based on doing sub X solves. And this concept was first introduced to me by Felix. He's the current world record holder on the 3x3 for average. And basically what sub X solves is you basically plan a step in solving a Rubik's Cube, and then you do that step blindfolded. So basically you'll have 4 steps, or 4 looks. And so the first step in solving a Rubik's Cube is solving a cross if you're using CFOP. And most sub 20 solvers can do their first pair of do their cross blindfolded. So the idea behind sub X solves is to basically be able to do as much as possible, or to be able to plan as much as possible in one look. So during inspection, instead of just playing a cross, you'd also plan a cross plus your first pair. So that would be your first look. The second look would be doing either 1 pair or 2 pairs blindfolded, depending on what your current skill level is. If you can do 1 pair blindfolded comfortably, it's a great idea to be able to do 2 pairs blindfolded as well. So after you've done 2 pairs blindfolded, the next step, or the third step in X look solves, would be able to do your last pair and also be able to predict what your OLL is going to be. And finally, the step after that is just, doing your PLL. And so that's sub X solves in a nutshell. And so basically what I'll do now is just go over each one of those steps in a little bit more detail. What I'll also do is put some links in the description that goes even more in detail on each particular step. So for the first step, cross plus 1 blind practice, basically you have 15 seconds pre-inspection in competition. However, when you're doing cross plus 1, it's going to take you more than 15 seconds if it's something you've never done before. So the first practice tip would just be to give yourself untimed inspection. So give yourself as much time as you need to be able to plan your cross plus 1. Now this is very challenging, but there are some tools out there to be able to help you out with this process. And what I'll do is put a link in the description. And basically this tool will allow for the learning curve for being able to do cross plus 1 in 15 seconds. It'll, make that learning curve not be so steep. So after you can do cross plus 1, the next step will be doing 2 pairs blind. So first I will work my way up to at least being able to do 1 pair blindfolded before doing 2 pairs blindfolded. And once you can do 1 pair blindfolded, definitely work towards doing 2 pairs blind. So basically all you do when you're doing 2 pairs blind is you look at what 2 pairs you're about to do, and then you just plan out what you want to do and then solve them. This basically works your ability to be able to visualize the cube. And so basically what happens is when you're doing your pairs, especially if you're turning very quickly, a lot of times it's hard to be able to look ahead for what your next pair is going to be, because it can be very difficult to track pieces on a cube when you're turning at 7, 8, 9, and even 10 turns per second. So the main point of doing this is, instead of just tracking pairs, you'll be able to just intuitively know where pairs are going to be. And something that also goes kind of hand in hand with being able to do 2 pairs blindfolded is the concept of multi-slotting. So I do know a little bit of multi-slotting. Now, as far as how much of it I actually use in solves is probably slim to none. Because with multi-slotting, there's just so many cases for it. But what I'll do is I'll put some links in the description on, some of the cases that are, I guess, like broken down to the point to where you can kind of intuitively figure out what to do. But essentially with multi-slotting, all you're doing is you're developing a mindset. It's more of a mindset more so than it is a method, so to speak. And it's a great idea to not think of multi-slotting as being algorithms, but the mindset for solving should just be to do a pair of your F2L and then work towards doing your next pair, or do a pair in your F2L, track what you're going to do for your next pair, and then do your next pair. With multi-slotting, basically what you do is you solve one pair, but while you're solving that pair, you make your next pair easier. So you influence your next pair, a la either making it, an easy insertion, or just inserting it at the same time as the current pair that you're inserting. So yeah, multi-slotting, I'd recommend just playing around with different insertions. So basically you have, you have 3 different types of insertions that you can do on an F2L pair. So there's the basic RU R prime insertion, there's the RU2 R prime insertion, and there's also the sledgehammer insertion, which is R prime F, RF prime. And so basically these insertions affect different pieces around the cube, and so sometimes you can influence the next pair that you're doing to make it a whole lot easier. So what I would recommend doing for multi-slotting is basically do some one-step stop solves with yourself. So instead of just doing slow solving where you're just kind of turning the cube without pausing, instead figure out what you're going to do first. So do your cross +1 practice, and then after you do that, for your next 2 pairs, figure out how you can do multi-slotting. So figure out, if I were to do an RU2 R prime insertion instead of an RU R prime insertion, how will that influence the next pair? Or if I were to do an R prime F prime RF, I said that wrong. If you were to do an R prime F RF prime insertion, how would that influence the pieces? And so on and so forth. And so kind of just play around with that. It takes a while to kind of get a feel for how it affects things. The last thing you could do with multi-slotting is, instead of just doing a basic insertion, so I'll kind of try to use an example here. So say you get to the step where, so say you're right here, and that's not really the best case. Trying to get this set up right. Okay, so say you got something like this. Okay. So basically with this, if I'm inserting I basically have the red-blue pair ready to be inserted. However, there's not much of anything else that I could see around the cube. I do see that I have this white corner right here. So what I could do here is, instead of just inserting that red-blue pair and then looking at what I'm going to do next, what I could do is I could bring this, I could start my insertion with an R and then do an L prime, then finish my insertion, and then bring that down. And see, now once I do that L, I've also set up my orange-blue pair. So that's another way that you could use multi-slotting. So now I just go ahead and pair that in. So at the very least, with that kind of insertion where you do an R or L move prior to doing an insertion, what happens is you can, a lot of the time, bring out corners that you can't see at the very least. And then there are also cases where you actually set other pairs up. So yeah, that's multi-slotting. I kind of went in length about it, more in length about it than I wanted to. But it's a great thing to be able to use. It does require a bit more of a look ahead, so you do have to kind of go really slow and think about what you're going to do. After you've done your 2 pairs blind and sub-X solves, the next thing you would do is your last pair plus predict what your OLL is going to be. Now this is very challenging, What I'll do is put a link in the description on how to do this. The YouTuber Critical Cubing has a great video out about it. However, if you can't do OLL prediction, another, I guess, like thing that would be helpful for you to use would be R-OLL. And so R-OLL essentially allows for you to be able to predict what type of PLO you're going to do, or what kind of PLO you're going to have next after you do OLL. So you can anticipate your PLLs. And so R-OLL, I'm just going to call it roll from now on, but it basically stands for recognition of your last layer, or recognition of your PLO before last layer. And so basically with roll, so I'll just go and do this pair. Okay, so say I get to this step here, and I actually want to do something else. Okay, so I get here. So basically what I'd do is I'd note my corner permutation, which involves usually looking at two stickers that are either the opposite or the same. So like right here I have two stickers that are the opposite. And then also I have like these two stickers are the same. Or I could look at these two stickers are opposite and this sticker is the opposite as this. The same as this one. So that will be a specific corner permutation case for this particular OLL. And I could basically determine what kind of PLL I'm going to get. So there are three types of PLLs. There's type 1. Type 1 PLLs are edge permutation cycle PLLs. Those are H, Z, and U. Type 2 PLLs are adjacent corner swap PLLs. So for these, there are quite a number of them. There's G, A, R, T, and F. And then lastly, you have type 3 PLLs, which are your diagonal swaps. So your diagonal swap PLLs are not, they're pretty much worse than all the other ones, usually. So those are E, N, V, and Y, with the worst being the N's. But E, V, and Y, those are usually pretty fast, and people can do N's pretty quickly too. But if you can, if you want to know exactly what kind of PLO you're going to get, R-OLL is nice to know. I'm currently working on learning it right now. I do want some advice from other cubers on, how well it works for them, particularly if they already know full R-OLL or roll. The cuber JPerm, he put out a video about it, and he said it shaved about half a second off of his times, which is not a whole lot, but it makes a difference when you're like averaging 11, 12 seconds and less. Half a second can go a long way. And so, yeah, I'm considering learning it, but basically with R-OLL, in order to make it a more complete system, we'll be pairing it with JOLL or JOLL. And with JOLL, it basically allows for you to be able to predict even better what your PLO will be in some cases, which I'm not going to go in detail about it. Jayden McNeill, he made a couple of videos about it. He actually was the one who came up with JOLL. It's actually, he named it after himself. But JOLL basically allows for you to be able to basically specify what kind of PLO you're going to get, determine what kind of PLO you're going to get on an even finer level. So with just R-OLL, for example, like if you were to get a adjacent swap PLL, with some OLL cases, if you also know JOLL, you'll be able to cut the number 8 down to about 6, I believe. And so that's very useful, primarily because with the adjacent swap PLLs, even for roll, like with the adjacent swap PLLs, what happens is with most of those OLLs, like most people like recognize those cases, or they actually do those cases with the headlights on the left. So I'll just go ahead and set one up here. So say we get a JPerm, which is an adjacent swap. So with the JPerms, like most people do their JPerms with the headlights on the left. The reason why this is useful to know, because if you had a JPerm from like, I'm gonna do a different JPerm, but say you had a JPerm like this where you don't see any headlights initially and you're doing two-side PLL recognition, With roll, you like with full roll, you be able to know where your headlights are going to be after, well, while you do your OLL. So I know my headlights will be on the right, then as soon as I go into my PLL step, I'd be able to do my pre-AUF or pre-adjustment of the U face. So put my headlights on the right side and then execute my PLL. Okay, so that's roll and JOLL. Roll and JOLL in combination are particularly useful. If you don't want to do JOLL, JOLL is kind of complex when it's combined with roll. Then I would advise or recommend at least learning full roll. But lastly here, I just want to talk about PLLs in general. So for PLLs, the PLL step, I mean, the main thing is recognition and execution. I mean, that's with anything with cubing, but for recognition with PLLs, it's a good idea to be able to recognize all your PLLs from just two sides. So from either the front or left face or the front and right face, and not from three faces, and definitely not from four faces. You don't want to be looking to the back face when you do your PLLs, and you also don't want to do unnecessary pre-AUFs or unnecessary U-turns in general. So learning two-side recognition is very useful. I'll put a link in the description for a good resource for how to learn two-side PLL recognition. Another helpful tip is being able to execute all your PLLs from at least two angles. So with this JPerm, I mean, it's pretty easy to recognize and execute. However, if you get it from, let's say you get it like this, you just done your OLL and now you have this. So instead of having to do a Y2, which is never good for PLL, and also so you won't have to do a U2 and then do your execution, it's also good to be able to know this PLL from the opposite angle. So, and that was bad execution, but you get the idea. So basically knowing all your outs from at least two angles allows for you to make better decisions when it comes to how you're going to do a pre-AUF, and it also eliminates AUFs in general sometimes. So learning from two angles, and that's pretty much it. That's my plan for improvement. Something else I didn't throw out there was learning COLL, which is corner orientation of the last layer, which is pretty much like if you get a cross case. So I'll go over it very briefly. So say I get, I'm not gonna do soon. So say I get this particular case here. So basically what I would do is I would take note of my corner permutation and then do a algorithm to solve my corners and also orient my last layer. And then that way I would get a type 1 PLL as opposed to a type 2 or a type 3 PLL. And so yeah, that's basically it. Like I said before, I'll put some links in the description that goes more in depth on each subset of sub-X solves. I'll also link a video to what sub-X solves are again in the description. So feedback is welcome on this video. So I mean, tips, advice, questions. I do plan on putting out more videos like this. I was actually inspired by Jayden McNeill to just put out a video where I ramble a bit. I think it's helpful for not only other cubers or people who are viewing your video, but also it's helpful for the cuber themselves or the person that's posting the video, because it allows for you to just think more about what you're doing, and also be able to just expand upon what you already know about cubing. So it's more like a journal, for cubing, I guess you could say. So yeah, that concludes this video. You guys have a great rest of your day.